Back in 2019, I took the night desk at a small branch library in Savannah, Georgia. Most nights were quiet. That was the point. I was 26, new to the city, grateful for a job where silence counted as skill. The branch sat on a slow corner under live oaks and a sagging power line. Moss hung low, like old scarves. Streetlights threw pale coins onto the sidewalk. Inside, the air ran cool. Paper, dust, and a faint citrus cleaner. The clock over the front door ticked like a metronome set too slow. My shift began at 7. We closed at 10. I shelved returns and unlocked the old card catalog for the genealogists who came in after dinner. There was a rule about the basement. Never more than 5 minutes down there alone, Ms. Vale told me. She'd worked the branch since the 80s. Sharp eyes, soft shoes. You'll lose track of time, she said. Signal gets patchy. Call if you need help. The first wrong note was nothing dramatic. A stapler clacked somewhere behind me as I stamped due dates. Small, solid. I looked up. No one at the counter. No one in the reading room except a student asleep over a workbook. I told myself it was the building settling. Old wood, old vents. I went back to the returns bin. The stapler clacked again. 2 beats. Then the faintest breath of a cough. I glanced toward the local history shelf. The cough came again, soft, apologetic, like someone trying not to be a bother. "Hello?" I said. My voice sounded too bright in the quiet room. The student snored once and shifted. A choice sat in front of me. Ignore it, or check, like a decent night clerk should. I took the small flashlight we kept by the stamps. I walked the aisles. Fiction, biography, local history. I moved past the display of city maps and looked down the row of tall gray stacks. Nothing. Just the whisper of the air unit. The smell of a book that hadn't been cracked open in years. Back at the desk, a single return sat on the mat that hadn't been there before. Green cloth cover, no jacket, a gold-embossed title that made my chest prickle. City Cemeteries, Records and Notes. I hadn't seen anyone set it down, no beep of the front door, no shuffle at the desk. I checked the stamp block. Someone had nudged it. A clean rectangle of ink marked the blotter pad like a test hit. Square, straight, recent. Ms. Vale came up from the office with a teacup. "You get your feet under you?" she asked. I showed her the book. She didn't touch it. She looked at it the way you look at a stray dog, fond and wary at once. "That one finds its way home," she said. "Don't fight it. File it under reference, middle shelf." "Why does it keep coming back?" I said. "Because people keep leaving it where it shouldn't be," she said, smiling. Then her smile faded. "And because some hands never learn to clock out." I thought she was joking. It sounded like a line shared with new hires, but there was nothing in her face that looked like a prank. We had a belief at that branch. Books belonged to the room. If a book wanted the front desk, it got there. If it wanted the map drawer, it found it. You helped. You didn't argue. 9 o'clock thinned the room to only the student and a man who walked with a cane. He came every Tuesday. He smelled like rain and tobacco, though he never lit anything inside. "Evening," he said. "Do y'all keep burial records for Laurel Grove?" "We've got an index," I said. "Lots of gaps." "You can try city cemeteries, records, and notes." He nodded like he already knew the answer. His eyes had that tired warmth you see in people who ask careful questions. I set him up at the long table under the brass lamp. He took off his hat. He ran his thumb along the edge of a page. "Thank you," he said. The cough sounded again, soft and close. The man with the cane looked up like he'd heard it too. He didn't look surprised, just respectful. "You hear that?" I asked. He tilted his head. "Librarians clear their throats," he said, "even when they move on." The echo arrived around 9:30. Not a voice, a rhythm, a small steady thud like a date stamp tapped without force. Thud. Pause. Thud. It came from the back workroom where we mended spines. "I'll go," I told Miss Vale. She looked at the clock. 90 seconds, she said. "Phone in your pocket. If you feel odd, come right back." I went through the staff door and into the workroom. It smelled like glue and rubber bands. My shoes clicked once on the tile, then softened as I stepped onto the faded rug under the long table. I stood still. The thud came from the far end, near the old typewriter no one used. A paperback lay there with its cover off and a strip of cloth drying along the hinge. Beside it sat the date stamp, an ink pad open like a small black lake. "Hello," I said, quiet, not brave, polite. The thud didn't come again. Instead, the tiniest scratch of paper over paper, a slip being eased into a pocket. I leaned a little and saw the checkout card we used for repairs. Someone had filled a line I hadn't written. My name, neat and square. Today's date. Time, 9:31 p.m. I hadn't touched the pen. My stomach flickered like a light with a loose bulb. I backed away, steady. No sudden moves. I reached the door, turned the knob, and the soft cough came once by my left ear, close enough to lift the hair there. "Thank you," I whispered, without knowing why. The air cooled on my cheek like a nod. Back at the desk, the student was gone. Ms. Vale held the return bin steady, while the man with the cane slipped the green book into it. He tapped the cover once, respectful. "Find what you needed?" I asked him. "Enough to write a letter," he said. He smiled. It reached one eye and rested on the other like it was tired. "Do you close right at 10? "We try," I said. He gave a small bow to the room. Not to me, not to Miss Vale, and to the room. We locked the doors at 10. We did the sweep. Lights off. Stacks checked. Restroom empty. I turned the brass key on the front door. The lock made a sound like a coin sinking into water. In the office, we counted the till. Routine wrapped the oddness in a blanket. I could breathe again. Ms. Vale handed me a ring with a short chain on it. "It's yours if you want to stay," she said. "What is it?" "Key to the basement elevator," she said. "Quicker than the stairs when you're moving boxes. But don't ride it alone after 10. That's tradition here." "Has anyone—" "Once," she said. Then she shook her head. "No harm, just a scare." The car stopped between floors. He heard whispering through the gate. Names, stacked numbers. It came like a reading list. He came up shaking and wouldn't shelve for a week. I put the key in my pocket. It felt heavy for something so small. On my way out, I slowed by the local history shelf. The green book had already left the bin. It sat where it belonged. Middle shelf, spine straight. A fresh card sleeve glued inside the back cover. My name on the repair line again. Time corrected in neat handwriting that wasn't mine. 9:30 p.m., not 9:31. I am not the brave sort. I am the sort who goes along with the house rules and keeps the tea hot. I didn't tell anyone else. I didn't want the story to grow teeth. Weeks slid by, little things repeated. A pencil rolled to the edge of the work table and stopped before it fell. A map drawer opened just before a patron asked for it. A quiet cough when someone raised their voice. The date stamp thudded twice if we forgot to change the ink pad. One Tuesday, the man with the cane didn't come. I noticed because the room felt wider. His chair stayed empty. At 9, the phone rang. A woman spoke softly. Her words came careful, like she was carrying a plate. "My father passed on Sunday," she said. "He loved your branch." He said the quiet there felt like a good church. I expressed what you say in those moments. She thanked me and paused. "He told me a story about a book that returns itself," she said. "Is that real?" "It returns if you respect it," I said before I could stop myself. She laughed, fragile. "That's what he said. He wrote a letter he never mailed. It's for someone named H. Vale. Can I bring it by?" After the call, I told Miss Vale. She stared at the clock and blinked twice. "He used to leave a small candy on the edge of the desk," she said. Told me it kept his hands busy while his mind did the walking. We waited at the front for the daughter. The room smelled like citrus and old cloth. The air felt cooler than the thermostat suggested. At 9:50, the door opened and a woman stepped in with a sealed envelope. Her eyes were the same tired warmth as her father's. "For you," she said to Miss Vale. Miss Vale didn't open it right away. She placed it on the blotter. Then she reached into the top drawer and took out a small dish. She set a wrapped caramel on the dish's edge. The cough came then, soft, close, like a satisfied breath you barely hear. I saw the date stamp shift on its own, just a hair. Ink pad lid settled with a click. We said goodnight. We locked the doors. We walked under the live oaks to the lot. Moss moved like slow water. A bat skimmed the streetlight and vanished. At home, I lay on my back and thought about the green book, the cough, the names whispered between floors, the way the card had corrected me by a minute. I didn't feel hunted. I felt supervised, guided by a tidy patience that wanted things in their places. It was an odd kind of comfort. Next week, I brought a second small dish. I placed it on the workroom table near the date stamp. I set 2 caramels side by side and left a clean checkout card beside them. The room stayed quiet. Then a soft thud of the stamp once. Not a warning, an answer. If you pass that branch late, you might see one lamp glowing above the history shelf. If you go inside, breathe, and mind your manners, the room will breathe back. In 2021, I rented a basement apartment in Macon, Georgia. The ceilings were low, the rent was cheap, and the air smelled faintly of rain even on dry days. Have you ever lived in a place that felt older than you could explain? Comment where you're listening from tonight. I was 28, newly divorced and trying to start over. The building had 3 units stacked like shoeboxes. An older couple lived upstairs. A quiet student rented the middle. My space sat half underground, reached by a narrow side door. The landlord, Mr. Greeley, handed me the keys and said, "Don't worry about the noises. Pipes shift when it rains." It rained the first night. Soft, steady drops tapped the window wells. I unpacked, brewed coffee, and turned on a lamp that made the whole room amber. Then came the tapping. Not rain, harder, hollow. 3 knocks beneath the stairs that led up to the middle unit. I froze, cup halfway to my mouth. It stopped. I told myself it was plumbing. Old buildings talk when no one else will. At midnight, it started again. 3 knocks. Pause. 1 slow drag, like a shoe sole against wood. I turned the lamp off and listened. The drag stopped. The air thickened. Then I heard breathing, measured, not close, but human enough to raise every hair on my arm. Morning made everything normal. No footprints on the steps, no sign of water. When I mentioned it to the student upstairs, she smiled nervously. "I hear that too," she said. "Only on weekends." Friday came clear and warm. Around 11, the knocks began again. This time I pressed my ear to the wall under the stairs. Each sound came from just behind the paneling, too deep for an animal. I fetched a flashlight. The stairs had a crawlspace door, painted shut. I wedged a butter knife into the seam and pried until it cracked open. Dust spilled out. Behind it, darkness breathed cold air against my face. I shone the light inside. A narrow cavity ran under the steps, bare earth, pipes, and something else. A small wooden crate, half buried. The flashlight flickered. I leaned closer. A whisper, not words, just the shape of one, floated out, dry and slow. I dropped the light. It rolled and stopped on its side, beam catching a faded tag nailed to the crate. J. Greeley, 1947. I slammed the door and backed away. The breathing stopped. The house fell quiet enough to hear my pulse. Next morning, I found Mr. Greeley in the yard trimming hedges. "Who was Jay Greeley?" I asked. He didn't look up. "My father," he said. "He built this place." I mentioned the crate. His clippers paused mid-snip. "That space was sealed for a reason," he said. "Please don't open it again." That night I slept on the couch, lamp on. At 2:30, I woke to footsteps above me, slow, deliberate, moving down the hall. The student wasn't home. She'd gone to visit family. Each step creaked toward the stairs. Then silence. Then 3 knocks below my floor, from the crawl space. I whispered, "I'm sorry," not sure to whom. The knocks stopped. The light flickered once, then steadied. 2 days later, Mr. Greeley called. "I'm closing the building for maintenance," he said. "You'll get your deposit back." His tone left no room for questions. When I returned for my last box, the stairs had been boarded over. Fresh wood, bright against the old frame. A faint line of dust traced 3 prints leading up, then none coming down. I drove away before sunset, windows down, wind clearing the smell of rain from my clothes. Sometimes when storms roll through Macon, I catch that same hollow rhythm on my porch. 3 knocks, a pause, then silence long enough to make me listen. If you ever rent a basement in Georgia and hear tapping under the stairs, don't answer. Some things just want to know you're there. In 2022, I drove the night shift between Macon and Savannah, Georgia. I learned the rhythm of mile markers, rain bands, and the quiet that comes after midnight. Where are you listening from right now? Tell me your route, and if you've ever stopped at a rest area that felt too awake. I hauled medical supplies in a white box truck. No sleeper, just a bench seat and a thermos. My run left Macon at 10 p.m., hit 3 clinics, then curled east on I-16 until the trees thinned and the air tasted like marsh. Exit 90 had a small rest area tucked into pines. 2 vending machines, 4 bathrooms, 1 old payphone that still took coins. You could feel the highway's breath there, a steady hush that made the palmettos nod. I had a habit. I parked under the last light, walked a loop, and stretched my back by the picnic table with the broken corner. The air smelled like damp cement and pine sap. The soda machine hummed a low, even note that made my shoulders loosen. On a Tuesday in early spring, fog lay low across the asphalt. It made the security light look like it hung inside a glass of milk. I pulled in, killed the engine, and listened to the tick of hot metal cooling. Then the payphone rang. One bright, honest sound in all that cottony quiet. 3 rings. Pause. 3 rings again. No one else was there. No cars, no night guard. Just me and the sound bouncing off the restroom tile. It rang a 3rd time. I laughed under my breath. A working payphone in 2022. I picked up. "Dispatch," a voice said, calm, crackly, like the call had taken a long road to reach me. "Is there a truck on the shoulder by the picnic table?" I looked at my truck. I looked at the picnic table. "Yes," I said. "Good," the voice said. "You'll want to move it forward 2 feet. There's a nail where your passenger tire will sit in an hour. It will be too late by then." The line clicked dead. I set the receiver back, slow. Fog breathed over the parking spots. The phone's metal body felt cool in my hand. I told myself it was a prank. Then I walked to the front of my truck and looked down. A 3-inch roofing nail lay half buried at the edge of the concrete, fresh rust, head bent slightly from a hit. I moved the truck 2 feet. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. On Thursday, I hit exit 90 again. Same fog, lighter this time. As I stepped from the truck, the payphone rang. 3 rings. Pause. 3 rings. I answered before it finished the 2nd set. "Dispatch," the voice said. Same tone. "Men's room. 3rd stall, flush twice, then leave the door open." "Why?" I asked. "The drain gurgles slow," the voice said. "If it sits, It backs into the hallway before morning." The line went dead. I wanted to laugh. I also wanted to be kind to whatever logic was at work. I went in. The lights popped on. Citrus cleaner and cool tile. I counted the stalls. 1, 2, 3, flushed twice, and left the door open. As I walked out, water rose and settled in the bowl with a quick, soft slurp like someone catching their breath. On the wall near the sinks hung a corkboard with missing pet flyers and a faded notice about an old lane closure. Tucked behind a thumbtack, I saw a small laminated card. Georgia. Adopt a Rest Area Volunteers. Thank you, Exit 90 crew. No names?
Just dates, ending in 1998.
Outside, the payphone sat quiet. A moth flapped against the bulb in the booth and rested on the glass. I told myself the calls came from the DOT. Maybe they were testing lines. Maybe someone had a sense of humor. I drove east with my radio low and my window cracked, letting pine and damp ride in with me. The third call came on a wet Sunday just before dawn. The rain had moved off, leaving the asphalt dark and clean. I parked, broke my own rule, and went straight to the phone. It rang before I lifted the receiver. One ring, a pause long enough to count to 3, then one more ring like it was breathing with me. "Dispatch," the voice said. Slick spot on the merge from the on-ramp. Diesel spill, small. Cones won't arrive for 20 minutes. Ease over and take it slow. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who listens," the voice said. The line clicked off. I stood with my hand on the cool metal of the phone. A car hissed by on the highway, tires speaking on wet pavement. I waited until my breath matched the soda machine's hum. Back on the road, the merge shone slightly rainbow in my headlights. Not big, enough. I eased over. My tires kept hold. Behind me, a sedan drifted, caught itself and straightened. No horn, no panic. Just a small grace granted at 60 miles an hour. I kept the secret, not out of fear, out of courtesy. It felt like sitting next to someone who talks to themselves soft. You don't interrupt. You let them have their rhythm. The calls kept coming. Once to tell me the paper towel dispenser jammed and people would shake water onto the floor. Once to ask me to prop the women's room door because the latch kept catching and stranding folks outside with a key that didn't work. Once to say, "There's a dog under the table." That night I turned and looked. A small brown dog lay curled in shadow, ribs showing like a gentle map. I crouched, held out my hand, and said hello. He blinked, stood, and let me scratch his ear. I gave him a piece of my sandwich. He ate, then sat against my ankle like it had been a long time since he'd leaned on anyone. I checked for a collar. Nothing. I left a bowl of water from my thermos and sat with him a while. Between us, the payphone stood quiet and watchful. The next week, I found a plastic container on the picnic table with a note under a rubber band. For the little brown dog at exit 90, travel nurse. Inside, kibble. The dog ate like he remembered how. He wagged once as if testing the motion, then twice with more confidence. I called him Buddy without thinking. It stuck. By summer, exit 90 felt like a small town with one main street and a single helpful neighbor. Sometimes the phone didn't ring. Sometimes it rang as my hand reached for it. It never rang when anyone else was around. I tried once, waited while 2 minivans traded seats and coolers, then stood by the phone. Silence. After the lot emptied, 3 crisp rings. "Dispatch," the voice said. "Thank you for the water bowls." "You're welcome," I said. "Is this your place?" "It's everyone's when they're tired," the voice said. Then softer. "Some of us stayed on duty." The partial reveal landed gently, like a napkin on a table. Not a threat, just a status. I started carrying a small toolkit for the restrooms, plumber's tape, a hex key, spare batteries for the auto flush sensor, I left notes in clean block letters. Fixed jam, spill mopped, drain clear. I signed them with a simple -N. It felt like writing in a logbook. In August, lightning took the power for an hour. The vending machine went quiet. The lights died. Heat rose fast in the rooms, heavy as a damp coat. And still, against the dark, the payphone rang. I picked up into darkness. "Dispatch," the voice said, lower than usual. "Walk the stalls with your phone light. Call out first. People panic in the dark." I did as told. I tapped on doors. "Hey there," I said. "Phone light coming by." A man's voice answered from the end, shaky but okay. In the women's room, a small voice said, "Here." I stayed outside the doorframe and talked to her while her mother juggled a baby and a diaper bag. We laughed once, soft at nothing in particular. The lights banged back on. A cheer rose and fell. "Thank you," I told the receiver. The voice paused. "You're on night duty too," it said. "You know how it is." Fall came. Fog returned like an old habit. Buddy learned my schedule and waited by the table. We'd walk to the far edge of the lot and back. The palmettos made a sound like someone folding paper. Late one night, the payphone rang longer than usual. 6 rings, then silence, then one short ring like a hiccup. I lifted the receiver. Static breathed in my ear. "Dispatch," the voice said. "It's time to move the dog." "Why?" I asked. "Storm line," the voice said. "High wind. He'll bolt a beat. He trusts you." I found Buddy under the table, curled tight. I clipped the spare leash I kept to his collar and opened the passenger door of my truck. He hesitated. I said, "Come on." He jumped in and circled twice, then settled with his head on my jacket. When the first gust hit, it came like a truck had pushed the air. Palmettos bent. Leaves ran in a group like they had somewhere to be. Rain hit in sheets. The security light flickered once, then held. We waited it out. Buddy snored. I scratched his ear and watched the payphone sway in small arcs like a patient metronome. When the storm passed, the lot was littered with twigs and one narrow branch that would have fallen straight across the picnic table. The phone stood still. The coin return clinked once without being touched. I stepped out with Buddy and checked the damage. Minor. A trash can lid gone. Water creeping toward the sidewalk and then deciding to stop. I picked up the phone to say thanks. No dial tone. A dead, familiar hush. I set the receiver back. It slid into place like a book finding its shelf. 2 weeks later, a new crew came through. They painted the curbs, repaired the table corner, and installed a modern emergency box on a pole. They also took the payphone down. I watched from my truck with a cup of coffee in both hands. The tech unscrewed the wall plate, fed the old line back into the conduit, and carried the phone to his van. He nodded at me like he knew I'd miss it. Buddy pressed his nose to the window and fogged a small oval. That night, the rest area felt too quiet. The vending machine hummed alone. No rings, no chores, just the smell of fresh paint and rain in the grass. I walked a loop anyway. When I passed the spot where the phone had hung, I felt a pocket of cool air like the shape of a hand. Not a touch, just a presence. "Thank you," I said. My voice went nowhere and everywhere at once. The emergency box blinked a steady blue, a small, helpful star. If you stop at exit 90 after midnight, listen for the hum and the quiet between cars. If you feel a draft near the empty wall, that's just someone on duty, making sure the night is tidy. In 2023, I spent 3 weeks house-sitting outside Savannah, Georgia. A quiet road, a big porch, and too many trees pressing close to the windows. The owners were a retired couple heading to visit family in Florida. They wanted someone to feed the cat, water plants, and collect mail. The pay was good. The house sat on the edge of a swamp, half an hour from town. When they handed me the keys, Mrs. Talbot said, "We leave that porch light on." Always. Her husband nodded but didn't look at her. He just said, "Even if it burns out, screw a new one in. Don't leave it dark." It sounded like superstition, the kind that clings to old houses and older memories. I promised I would. The first 2 nights went fine. Cicadas hummed so thick they blurred into one sound. The cat slept under the sofa like a secret. I read, watched the news, and listened to frogs trading songs across the swamp. Then came the 3rd night. Storm clouds rolled in without lightning, just wind steady and low, like a truck idling miles away. I stepped onto the porch with a mug of coffee and saw the bulb flicker. It dimmed, brightened, dimmed again. Then it went out. The sudden dark hit harder than it should have. The swamp sounded closer. I could smell the water, mud, metal, and something older. I went inside, found a fresh bulb, and came back with a chair to reach the fixture. As I twisted the new bulb in, the light came alive halfway through the turn. Bright white, no hum. For a second, I saw something move at the edge of the yard. Not a shape, just a shift, like the dark had taken a step. I stared into the trees until the motion blended back into stillness. Then I went in and locked the door. Around midnight, the cat woke me. She hissed at the window, fur up, staring toward the porch. The light still burned, but the air around it looked thick, like fog trapped inside glass. I lifted one blind. The yard was empty, but on the porch boards, under the light, was a dark circle the size of a dinner plate, wet, like someone had stood there in dripping clothes. I checked twice to be sure it wasn't just shadow. It wasn't. By morning, the circle was gone. The boards were dry. The cat wouldn't go near the door. I called the Talbots to check in. They sounded cheerful. I mentioned the flicker, trying to sound casual. Mrs. Talbot went quiet for a few seconds, then said, "You changed it, didn't you?" "Yes," I said. "I had a spare." "You did right," she said. Then, softer, "We started that after the flood." Her husband took the phone. "You'll hear walking some nights," he said. "Don't open the door. The light keeps her out." Then he hung up. The words sat in my head all day, heavy and slow. Keeps her out. That evening, I turned every interior light off except the lamp by my chair. I sat by the window and watched the porch. The bulb held steady until just after 10. Then it pulsed once, faintly, as if something had passed in front of it. The air thickened again. The cat growled from under the couch. Outside, a small sound broke the rhythm of the frogs, a single wet footstep on wood. I kept still. Then another step, closer to the door. And then breathing. Not harsh, just there, human and patient. The porch light swelled brighter, almost blue. The steps stopped. The breathing faded. The night sighed and started again. I waited an hour before I moved. When I opened the door at dawn, dew coated everything except one small patch under the light. Dry. Like something had stood there all night and blocked the moisture. I made coffee, trying not to think. The cat watched me with wide eyes that didn't blink. That afternoon, I went into town for groceries. At the hardware store, I asked if anyone knew the Talbot place. The clerk, an older man with hands like old rope, nodded. "They built that house after the river took the first one," he said. "Back in '98, a woman drowned there, friend of the family. Got caught in the current. They say the flood brought her to the porch before it went down." He shrugged. "Folks around there keep a light on for her. You can't leave her standing in the dark." I didn't ask more. I just bought extra bulbs. The last night, the air was still and clear. The porch light hummed faintly, a small comfort. I sat reading by the window when I saw movement again, this time clear. A woman stood under the light, barefoot, dress clinging like wet fabric, head tilted slightly, as if listening for her name. I couldn't see her face, only the outline, haloed by the bulb's glow. Her hands hung limp at her sides, water dripping from her fingertips onto the boards. The sound was small but exact. Drop, drop, drop. The cat hissed, ran behind the chair, and vanished. I sat frozen. The woman turned slowly toward the door, one shoulder at a time. Her face came into view, not terrifying, just empty, the kind of expression someone wears when they've been waiting too long. The light flickered once, then steadied, and when it did, she was gone. Only a faint outline of water remained on the wood. When the Talbots returned 2 days later, I didn't mention her. They seemed relieved to see the light still shining. Mrs. Talbot smiled and said, "You did well. She never comes inside when it stays lit." I asked quietly, "Who was she?" She looked toward the porch. "Our neighbor," she said. "She tried to save our boy in the flood." Then she turned to the window and whispered, "She found him. If you drive the back roads near Savannah and see a porch light burning alone through the trees, leave it be. It's not for the living anymore." In 2021, I took a seasonal job at a peach orchard outside Perry, Georgia. The pay was fair, the sunset soft, and the silence after dark felt like a held breath that never let go. The orchard covered 70 acres. Rows of trees stretched straight as soldiers, their branches heavy with fruit. Each morning smelled of sugar and soil. Each evening, the scent turned faintly sour, like overripe peaches sighing in the heat. My first night, the foreman, Ellis, gave me a small cabin near the packing shed. He pointed toward the far hill where a rusted bell hung on a pole. "If you hear it ring after dark," he said, "stay inside. Just wait it out." I laughed, but he didn't. He looked at me with that steady, practical gaze men get when they've run out of ways to explain something. The first week passed easy. Hot days, long work, cold water. The crew joked that I'd picked the quietest post in Georgia. But every evening around 9, I'd hear something faint, metal shifting, almost like a small hammer tapping far away. Then silence. One Thursday night, a storm rolled in from the west. Thunder trembled low. The air grew damp and metallic. I stood on the porch watching rain sheet across the orchard. Then I heard it. One clear bell ring. High, pure, and sharp enough to cut through the storm. The sound didn't echo. It just hung there, like it was waiting for someone to answer. Then came another. Then 3 slow tolls, evenly spaced. I stepped down from the porch. Rain soaked through my shirt in seconds. The bell stopped. The orchard went quiet, except for the hiss of water on leaves. The next morning, the air smelled strange. Wet iron and crushed fruit. Down by the hill, I saw footprints in the mud leading to the bell pole. Bare feet, small, and not washed away by the storm. At breakfast, I told Ellis. He wiped his hands on a rag and said, "We don't talk about that too much." I pressed him anyway. He sighed and poured more coffee. "Back in '79, he said, "a girl named May used to help her father out here. She'd bring him lunch, ring that bell at dusk so he'd come in before dark. One night he didn't. Storm came through just like that one. They found his truck in the lower field, door open, keys inside. Never found him. He looked out the window toward the hill. Her mama said May kept ringing the bell so he'd hear it, even after they told her to stop. Couple weeks later, she went missing too. Folks said she went looking for him. The story settled in my mind like dust that wouldn't sweep out. That night, I left my window cracked to listen. Around 9, I heard the same 3 rings, clear, measured. Close enough that I felt the sound more than I heard it. The cabin lights flickered once. The air shifted, cold and damp, as if a door had opened to somewhere deep underground. Then, faintly, a voice, a child's, or maybe a young woman's, humming a few uneven notes. I froze in bed. The humming stopped. A moment later, the bell clanged once, as if struck too hard, and the night broke open with quiet again. At dawn, I walked up to the hill. The bell hung still. The grass under it lay flattened in a perfect circle, and on the pole, carved into the wood, were initials, MG. When Ellis saw me staring, he nodded. She carved that before she disappeared. He said, "Every year, around the same week, we hear her call her daddy home. Some say it's kindness, some say it's warning." That afternoon, while loading crates, I noticed one of the other workers, Darla, wearing a silver pendant shaped like a bell. She caught me looking. "My grandma used to pick here," she said. "She said if you ever hear it, you light a candle and stay still. The sound doesn't hurt you. It just counts who's listening." That night I did exactly that.
Candle on the windowsill.
Chair by the door. When the first bell rang, I whispered, "I hear you." The next two came softer, almost like thank yous. Then nothing but rain. The following morning, Ellis told me no one else had heard a thing, not even Darla. Weeks passed. The harvest ended. The trees went bare, their bark gone gray with dust. On my last night, I climbed the hill. The bell rope was gone, snapped clean. Only the frames stood, rusted and quiet. But when I turned to walk back, the air thickened once more. A single clear note drifted through the orchard, light as breath. It came from somewhere deeper among the trees. Not the bell, but something smaller, like a child's toy ringing from far off. I didn't go looking. I just stood there until it faded. The wind picked up. Leaves stirred like they were whispering someone's name. If you ever walk through a Georgia orchard at night and hear a single bell calling through the rain, keep walking. It's only someone making sure their family finds their way home. In 2020, I worked nights at a roadside motel near Brunswick, Georgia. The neon vacancy sign buzzed like a quiet bee, and the parking lot smelled like warm tar and salt. I took the job because it came with a room and free coffee. 10 rooms, 1 office, 2 ice machines that coughed more than they froze. Truckers came through late. Families came through early. The middle of the night belonged to other people. The owner, Miss Ruth, handed me a key ring and a ledger. She tapped the glass door with one finger. "Keep the vacancy on," she said. "All night. If it blanks out, flip the breaker, then wait." "Why the wait?" I asked. "So it remembers where it lives," she said. Then she gave me a look that said not to press. The sign had one bad letter. The A stuttered. It would drop out, flare, then hold like it had thought better of quitting. The glow washed the office in a thin pink that made skin look tired and plants look plastic. I grew used to it. The first wrong note came on a Monday, just after 2. No cars on the highway. Rain from the marsh moved in slow. I sat behind the glass and logged the last check-in. The ice machine down the hall tapped once, like a knuckle on a hollow door. I stood and checked the outdoor camera. Empty walkway, vacant pool, neon humming steady. When I came back to the desk, the bell on the counter trembled and rang itself once. A clean, small ring in the quiet room. "Hello?" I said. It came out soft, like I didn't want to bother the night. Nothing answered, but on the desk pad a damp circle formed, the size of a thumb, then faded. I watched the paper drink it and go dry again. I told myself the air was heavy. Marsh air does that, finds paper and makes it sweat. I wiped the bell and kept working. Just before 3, headlights swept the lot. A sedan pulled in, windows fogged from inside. The driver sat still a long time, hands at 10 and 2. No one got out. I waited. People gather themselves before they face a desk. They check their face in the mirror. They count cash. They breathe. The sedan backed up. It didn't leave. It rolled slow along the rooms, then stopped by 7. The engine cut. The lights died. I waited for a door to open. None did. The A in vacancy dropped out and flared back on. I felt the tiny lift in my chest when it returned, like a held breath released. At 4, I did the walk. Room 7's curtain pulled tight. No gap for light, no air running. The concrete still held the heat of the day, even with rain lifting off it in little ghosts. I almost knocked. I didn't. I went back to the office and made a fresh pot. Miss Ruth came in at 6 with a paper bag, 2 biscuits, no small talk. She looked at the ledger and tapped a blank line near the bottom. "You had a car," she said. "No guest." "They didn't come in," I said. "Parked by 7, sat a while. Left?" "Which way?" she asked. "Toward the bridge," I said. She folded the bag and slid it into the trash. "Keep the sign on," she said again, like I might have let it slip while she slept. That Thursday, a couple checked into 3. Teachers. Atlanta plates. They asked for a quiet room near the end and thanked me more than once. At midnight, the man came back to the office for ice. He touched the bell without ringing it. "You ever get visitors?" he asked. "At a motel?" I said and smiled. "Not that kind," he said. "Old ones." "Sometimes the A flickers," I said. "Feels like somebody breathing." He nodded like that made sense. He left with his bucket and a nod at the sign. At 2, the sedan returned. Same one. Same fogged windows. It parked by 7 and idled. The vacancy buzz rose and fell like it felt the engine through the wall. I picked up the desk phone, then set it down. What would I say? Come in or go on? People hate being told what to do when they've already done it in their head. The lobby clock ticked too loud. I wrote the time on the pad, 2:16. A drop formed on the paper again, a clean, dark circle. My name, written earlier, bled at the edge, then settled. I stood and opened the office door. The night was warm and smelled like wet rope. Tree frogs sang in a stitch pattern, even, precise. "Can I help you?" I called. The sedan's dome light came on. A woman sat alone. She didn't look at me. Her face was turned toward the passenger seat like she listened to someone I couldn't see. Then she nodded to no one, started the engine, and left without looking back. In the morning, I told Miss Ruth. She set 2 receipts on the counter and said, "Some people try to check in without coming inside." "How do you mean?" I asked. "They think if they sit under the glow, it'll make a room for them," she said. "Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't." She flipped the breaker cover with her nail. "Don't kill that sign." Not even for a minute. Saturday brought a full house. Fishermen before dawn. A family with a lab that slept like a person. Room 8 asked for extra towels and thanked me in a way that said they were trying hard. At 1:40, the A went dark and stayed dark. The rest of the word held. I felt the loss like a missing tooth. I went out back to the box and flipped the breaker down. The neon died. The lot fell into a softer dark. I counted to 30. Between numbers, I heard the ice machine click, then a slow drip. When I pushed the breaker up, the word came back in a wash. A held on the second try. The office warmed a shade. Inside, the bell on the counter rang once, then once more, as if someone had tapped it with a nail. On the pad, another wet mark bloomed, not round this time, long like a finger dragged once. I pressed my palm there. The paper cooled. The damp moved into my skin and left the page crisp. I breathed out. "Okay," I said to the empty room. "I'm watching." Just after 3, a patrol car rolled in. Officer stepped out, rain spots on his hat brim. He nodded at the sign. "Glad you keep that on," he said. "Bridge is fogged in." People look for the pink and slow down. "You see a silver sedan?" I asked. "Been circling this week." He shifted his weight. "Maybe," he said. "Woman driver. Out of county tags. We've tried to help her. She won't stop." "Is she in trouble?" He looked past me at the ledger. "Long time ago," he said. Then he took a card from his pocket. "If she pulls in again, call this number. We'll try one more time." He left. The door shut soft. The A stayed lit. Sunday night, I poured coffee at 2 and waited. No cars. Rain whispered. The bell was still. I began to think the week had passed and the road had decided to hold what it held. Then headlights. The sedan eased in like it didn't want to wake anyone. It stopped under the sign. The A flickered and steadied, casting that tired pink down the windshield. I picked up the phone and dialed the number on the card. "Exit 36, I said when they answered. "She's here." "Stay on," the voice said. I set the receiver down on the desk without hanging up and stepped to the glass. The woman sat still, both hands on the wheel. Her head turned toward the passenger seat, like before. After a long minute, she looked at me. I couldn't see her face clearly. The neon made her eyes look deep. She lifted one hand like someone waving from a boat. 2 cruisers slid in quiet. No lights, no siren. They boxed her easy. An officer approached slow, palms open. I opened the office door. The air smelled like hot rain and cigarettes that hadn't been smoked. The officer tapped the window. She looked up at him. He said something I couldn't hear. She shook her head. He spoke again, longer. He didn't touch her door. The A went dark. The whole word hiccuped and steadied. The officer stepped back and nodded toward me. "Kill the breaker," he called. Miss Ruth's warning rang in my ear. I stood there with my hand on the metal door frame and felt the cold run up my arm like water. 30 seconds, he said, "Oh, please." I walked to the box. Down. Count. Up. When the word came back, the sedan was empty. The passenger door hung open 2 inches. A damp shape marked the seat. No one stood in the lot. The officers didn't look surprised. They closed the car gently and checked the rooms, polite as guests. One of them came to the desk and signed a form. "Thank you," he said. "Who was she?" I asked. "Someone who didn't make the bridge," he said. "Rain night, years back. She watches for a room before she tries again." "Does the sign help?" I asked. "It keeps people from driving blind," he said. "It gives them a place to stop." After they left, I sat by the glass and watched the pink buzz paint the wet concrete. My hand still felt cold where it had touched the breaker. On the pad, a new mark had appeared. 2 short dashes beside room 7, then a small curve like a check. I circled it with my pen and left it there. Miss Ruth came early. She set a fresh bulb on the counter, even though the sign didn't need one. "We keep spares," she said, "just in case the night asks." I nodded. We ate our biscuits and drank our coffee and didn't say much. Sun pushed at the clouds. The neon looked weaker in daylight, as if it wanted to rest. I worked 3 more months. The sedan didn't return. The A stuttered, then learned to hold longer between flares. The bell rang itself once a week for no reason I could prove. I learned to let it. On my last shift, I wrote a note and taped it inside the breaker door. "Count to 30, it said. "Wait for the breath. Then bring it back." I locked the office and stood in the lot. The sign hummed. The marsh smelled like metal and green things growing fast. I raised a hand to the road the way she had. No cars passed, just the night, awake and patient. If you drive US 17 near Brunswick after midnight and see a tired pink glow on wet concrete, slow down. There's a room for breath there, whether you stay or not. In 2018, I took a weekend job cleaning an old movie theater in Athens, Georgia. The pay was small, but I liked the quiet. Popcorn dust, soft carpets, and the faint hum of screens that hadn't shown a film in years. The Majestic had shut down in the 90s. It reopened as a retro venue that only filled up on Fridays. My job started after midnight when the crowd cleared. I'd sweep aisles, wipe seats, and lock up before dawn. The manager, Connie, walked me through the first shift. "Every room's numbered, but only one has sound," she said. "Room 3. The others are dead channels." She stopped at the projection booth door. "If you ever hear film running up here when the lights are off," she added, Just close the door and let it finish." I laughed. She didn't. "Old wiring," she said, but her eyes didn't match her voice. The first 2 nights were normal. Soda syrup, popcorn, candy wrappers. The building held the sweet, stale smell of thousands of weekends. Then Saturday, I unlocked room 3 and heard the reel spin. The projector light was off. No movie, just the dry rush of tape sliding through empty air. I went to the booth. The switch was down, the cord unplugged. The reel still turned. It wasn't fast, just steady, like someone was winding time by hand. A faint voice came through the wall speaker. 2 lines from a song I didn't know. Old, warbled, southern drawl. Then a woman's laugh. I backed out, slow, shut the booth door, and waited. The sound ran 2 more minutes, then stopped, clean. The next night, it happened again. Same hum. Same short song. Same laugh that trailed off before the reel clicked. I told Connie. She rubbed her arm like she'd felt something. "Just let it play," she said. "She likes her moment." I asked, "Who?" She looked toward the posters on the lobby wall, faded faces of forgotten films. "The usher," she said. "Been here since it opened. Never took a break." I thought she was joking, but the way she said it made my skin prickle. Midweek, I stayed late to test it. No crowd, no noise, just the projector booth breathing its soft hum. I brought a flashlight and sat in the back row. At 2:17 a.m., the reel began to move. No power in the booth, yet the metal wheel turned. The sound came faint but clear. A man's voice saying, "Ready when you are, Miss May." Then the lights dimmed by themselves, one by one, and a faint shimmer appeared on the screen. Not a full picture, just movement dash dash. 2 people dancing in black and white, grainy, smiling at something off screen. I couldn't see faces, only the way they leaned toward each other like the air between them mattered. The woman's hair caught the light. Her dress spun once. Then the film stuttered. The figures froze. The reel slowed to silence. When I checked the booth, the film had no images printed on it, just blank clear tape. But the metal reel was warm, like it had been used. Connie met me at the door. "You stayed," she said. Her tone wasn't praise or blame, just fact. "Who's Miss May?" I asked. "She worked here," Connie said. "Front row every night after closing. Waited for her husband to come home from service. They were supposed to meet during the final screening before the theater shut down." "Did he make it?" I asked. She looked at the poster for Casablanca and said quietly, "No." But she kept the light on in room 3 for him. Every weekend she'd play their song on the speakers while she cleaned. When she passed, that reel kept turning. It sounded like a legend staff tell new hires, but her voice had no story in it. Only truth she'd learned to live with. The following weekend, the crowd packed in for a classic marathon. When the last show ended, I began my rounds. I left room 3 for last. The projector light glowed faintly blue, though the power had already been cut. On the back row sat a single program folded into the shape of a swan. Inside it, a note in neat cursive. "Thank you for keeping the room clean." He finally made it. I froze, paper trembling in my hand. I looked toward the screen. The faint shimmer pulsed once, and in it, 2 silhouettes stood side by side, motionless, like a picture someone wanted to remember. Then the lights brightened all at once. The reel stopped. Silence filled every corner. I left the note on the seat, locked the door, went outside and breathed air that didn't hum. Next night I came in early. Connie pointed at the booth key.
"You won't hear it anymore," she said.
Her tone was almost kind. The building felt lighter. Dust drifted in the light like falling snow. I walked the aisles and heard nothing but the sound of my own shoes. Still, when I clocked out and turned off the hallway lights, room 3's door glowed faintly blue around the edges. Not bright enough to see, just enough to find your way if you needed to. If you ever sit alone in a Georgia theater long after the credits, listen for a reel that hums without power. That's just Miss May making sure no one leaves before the dance is done. In 2019, I worked part-time at a small nursing home outside Augusta, Georgia. 12 residents, 2 halls, and a night shift that felt longer than the clocks could hold. The job sounded simple: make rounds, answer buzzers, keep coffee hot for the aides when they came in at 6. The director, Mr. Hall, gave me a clipboard and a flashlight. "Only thing you need to know," he said, "don't move Mrs. Ellerby's chair." He must have seen my look. "She passed 10 years ago," he added. "Family donated the rocker. It stays by the window in room 12, makes the rest of the hall quiet." I nodded, though the way he said quiet made it sound like a trade. The first week went smooth. The hall smelled like lemon cleaner and wool blankets. The residents dozed with TV light flickering over their faces. Room 12 sat empty, except for the rocker and an old radio that never worked. At night, when I walked my rounds, I'd hear the chair creak once. Just once. The slow start of a rock and the soft settle back. Wood against tile. Not a mouse, not the vent. Too even, too polite. By the third night, I started talking to it. "Evening, ma'am," I'd whisper. "You can keep your seat." The chair stayed still till I left. Then one faint creak as I reached the door, like a nod from someone raised to mind their manners. Friday, the storm hit. Thunder rolled through the halls, and the backup lights flickered amber. I checked each room. No panic, just uneasy murmurs from light sleepers. When I reached room 12, the door stood half open. The rocker moved slow and steady, and the radio hissed with a thin thread of music. A hymn I didn't know, something about crossing home. The power blinked back on. The chair stopped. The radio went silent. In the morning, Mr. Hall looked tired. "Storms stir her up," he said. "She sat that window every night waiting for her husband." He worked the paper mill. Collapsed there on a night shift, but no one told her till dawn. She used to rock and hum till sunrise. He rubbed his eyes. When she passed, the chair didn't stop for 2 days. We finally just left it be. After that, I treated room 12 like a person. I greeted it first, locked it last. Some nights the air inside smelled faintly of rose powder. Other nights like fresh rain on concrete. 2 weeks in, a new aide named Troy took the shift with me. He was young, loud, curious. At midnight he wandered down the hall and called, "Hey, this your haunted chair?" I said, "Don't touch it." He grinned. "Come on, man. What's it gonna do, creak at me?" Before I could answer, the chair started to move. No breeze, no draft. Just motion dash dash. Slow, rhythmic, almost soothing. Troy's grin faded. He backed out and muttered, "Okay." We didn't mention it again. The next evening I found the chair angled away from the window. Just a few inches, but enough to show it had turned on purpose. The radio sat upright, clean of dust. Someone or something had wiped it down. When I straightened the chair, a whisper brushed the air. Not words, just the soft sound you make when you've been seen. Around 3 a.m., the buzzer from room 4 rang and stopped before I reached it. No one inside had pressed the call light. When I checked the camera feed, the rocker in room 12 moved twice and stilled again. That pattern kept up for the rest of the month. Every time a patient stirred or drifted near the edge of waking, the chair would rock once. A quiet comfort, like a nurse doing rounds on the old schedule. Near Christmas, Mrs. Hall from room 9 took a bad turn. We called hospice. She asked me to open her door wide. "Can I see the end of the hall?" she whispered. I nodded and rolled her bed so she could look straight toward room 12. She smiled faintly. "Saw her waiting there last night," she said, "rocking slow. I knew I wasn't alone. That night, when she passed, the buzzer stayed dark, but the radio in room 12 played the same hymn again. Thin and soft, just enough to fill the hall. The next morning, Mr. Hall said nothing. He just placed a vase of white lilies beside the chair and walked away. I worked 2 more months. Every night, 1 creak when I started rounds, and 1 at dawn when I wrote my report. Then it stopped. No motion, no sound. Only still air and sunlight through thin curtains. On my last day, I found a small white thread on the seat cushion. Part of a nurse's uniform, or maybe a sleeve that brushed by. I left it there. Some chairs deserve to hold their stories. If you ever pass a Georgia nursing home and see one curtain moving when the rest are still, don't worry. It's just Mrs. Ellerby making sure her hall is quiet for the night. In 2024, I helped my cousin clear out our late uncle's place outside Valdosta, Georgia. A small farmhouse, 2 acres of pines, and a shed everyone said not to open after dark. The house sat quiet for a year after my uncle passed. We went down in spring when the grass had grown waist-high. Cicadas buzzed like wires. The porch boards bent under every step. Inside, dust thickened the air like fog. Old photographs faced the walls. Drawers still held letters tied with string. My cousin, Louis, handled most of the sorting while I boxed up kitchen things. Midday, he said, "We'll need to check the shed." I told him the stories, that our uncle used to hear someone knocking out there late at night, that he'd started locking it from both sides. Louis laughed. "Let's just get it done before dark." The path was narrow and soft, pine needles piled deep. The shed leaned a little, roof sagging like an old hat. A rusty padlock hung from the door latch, open. Inside smelled of oil and cedar. Tools lined the walls, arranged by size. The air felt colder than it should. A single bare bulb swayed from a wire. When I pulled the chain, it flickered on, yellow and weak. In the corner stood an old wooden chair and a small table with a glass jar on top. Inside the jar was something gray and thin, folded like cloth. Louis picked it up. The lid came free too easily. He tilted it toward the light. "Paper," he said. He pulled 1 sheet out. The writing was faded pencil, dates, times, and a short note on each line. April 12th, tapping, 11:47. April 13th, voice said, "I'm here." April 14th, don't answer. More pages followed all the same, the handwriting slanting worse each day. The last one read only, "If it asks for light, don't give it." A draft moved through the shed, though the windows were shut. The bulb swung. The chain clicked against glass. Then faintly we heard it. 1 knock on the outside wall, not echoing from inside, but sharp and measured, like knuckles on the wood right beside the door. Louis froze. Another knock. Then 1 more. 3 in a row. We stared at the wall. I whispered, "Probably branches." He nodded, but neither of us moved. When the sound came again, it came from the other side of the shed. Same rhythm, same distance between strikes. The bulb dimmed until it glowed red like an ember. Louis grabbed my arm. "We're done," he said. We stepped out, closed the door, and pushed the padlock through the latch. The air outside felt heavy and thick. Back at the house, we sat on the porch and didn't talk for a while. Then Louis said he wasn't crazy. I didn't argue. That night we stayed in town. Neither of us wanted to sleep there. But curiosity has bad manners. The next afternoon we drove back to finish. The lock on the shed hung open again. No wind, no sign of break-in. The jar sat where we'd left it, but the paper was gone. Only a scrap of gray thread clung to the inside rim. I took a picture of the table for the record. When I checked my phone later, the photo showed something else. A faint glow on the wall behind the chair, shaped like a doorway, with darker shadow at the center as if someone stood inside it. I deleted the photo. It didn't feel like proof. It felt like permission. We finished packing that day. I made one last walk through the house before locking up. In the hallway, beside the back door, a light bulb I'd never replaced clicked on by itself. Soft white, still air, no switch nearby. I whispered the last line from the notebook. If it asks for light, don't give it. And turned the bulb till it went dark. The next morning, I got a call from Lewis. He'd driven past the property at dawn. Said the shed was glowing faintly inside, pale yellow like a lantern underwater. Said he didn't stop. A week later, we sold the house. The new owners fenced the back lot. I never told them about the jar or the list. But sometimes when storms roll through and the lights flicker, I hear 3 faint knocks on the wall before the power steadies. Always 3, never 2, never 4. If you ever find an unlocked shed in the pines of Georgia, leave it closed. Some lights only wait for someone kind enough to turn them back on.